So, good morning everybody.
Hi everyone.
Today we're at Devil's Bridge. Thank you. Devil's Bridge. As you can tell, it's exceptionally windy here, hence the reason I'm holding my hat on. Jill's not, she's being very...
I am, no, I'm holding mine as well.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm
Right,
holding mine
okay.
as well.
Apparently the reason this was called Devil's Bridge is because this is where they say that slaves used to come to jump off the rocks here to instant death. There's no way you can get out. And the reason they actually did it here was because they thought that this was the closest place to Africa from the island, and that the tides and everything would actually take them across to Africa, and their bodies would lay in Africa where they belonged. So it's quite an amazing place really, but you can see how rough it is and how windy it is, and if you jumped off it you wouldn't stand a chance.
No, and there's blowholes and there's a stone bridge, which is why it's called Devil's Bridge, I think, and there's arches and various other bits and pieces which we're going to explore as we go around this little headlandy bit. Good morning everybody, I'm Jill behind the camera. Oh no, in fact next to me is Roger.
I'm Roger.
And we're which way now? So behind us you can see hopefully the Devil's Bridge itself, and it's really good to be here on a rough day because you can see the waves splashing up behind it as well as in front of it, and you can imagine that if slaves wanted to kill themselves this would be a great place to do it, because if they jumped off here they wouldn't stand a chance.
Interesting enough, the guidebook actually said it recommends you not to walk across the Devil's Bridge because it's a little bit slippery. You can quite see why, can't you?
Certainly can.
God dear.
So we're at Betty's Hope, which is an old slave plantation. It's an old sugarcane plantation. And we've just been inside the main building there, and it's very interesting reading. There were 250 slaves who were not employed but lived here, and conditions sound pretty grim. Basically, they were given the minimal just to keep them alive. And it said at one point that women, or quite often women, outnumbered men towards the end of the slavery time because men were better at doing other jobs. And a lot of the women suffered miscarriages because they were carrying 100 weight of sugar cane at a time and that kind of thing. Sounds absolutely horrific. And in theory, emancipation for the slaves happened in 1834, but in practice it didn't actually happen until the end of the 1800s when people started actually educating the children, and that was really the start of the slaves really being free. It's quite worrying, isn't it, really? So it's quite an interesting train behind us here. This was used to carry workers, but actually what they were saying was that in 1904 they built a train to carry the sugar cane, and at that time they didn't any longer grind the sugar cane here into juice or whatever. So in 1904 the windmills stopped working, but they had basically down on the road that we came in on there would have been a train track, and everything would have been transported down there, and then there was one central sugar processing factory on the island. But 1904, that's quite amazing, and there were 50 miles of tracks on the island as well, which for a small island is not bad at all. So this windmill was one of two that they had here, and they needed two to manage the amount of sugarcane that was grown here. And basically originally these windmills had vertical rollers, and they only managed to crush 60% of the cane into juice. They then made them into ones with horizontal rollers, and they also put a juice collector underneath, and now they have 80% of the cane that was actually made was being transferred into juice, which made a huge difference, a 20% increase on the amount of sugar juice that they could get. Quite incredible. So behind me is the distillery, and apparently every sugar plantation also had a place where they made rum, because part of the excess stuff from the sugar juice, I said about the fact that 80% of the cane was made into juice, and that 20% that wasn't was put into vast tanks here. It was fermented and allowed to get stronger, and then it was basically made into very strong rum. But unfortunately it was kept or piped through lead pipes, kept in lead tanks. A lot of people got very ill from lead poisoning from drinking it, and it was also not clear because they used to take off the heads or the first bit of the distilling process, which they don't do anymore, and they used that as well, so it was not very clear, and it probably was pretty lethal as well. So we're here at Nelson's dockyard and we're surrounded by huge boats. Some of them are motor yachts, some of them are yachts, huge sailing boats just over there as well. But we've just been reading about the captain's house here, or the capstan house, and it was talking about the fact the capstan used to be pulled to get the boats to actually tip over so they could clean the bottom of them. And it said that when they tipped the boats over, they actually played sea shanties on the fiddle, but the men were not allowed to sing along. And it's interesting because in Cornwall, obviously, we have a very strong tradition of sea shanties, and you do wonder whether the two are linked. So as well as all of the massive yachts here, we also came across the end of the world's greatest row, or world's toughest row, I can't remember what it was called, which basically people are rowing from La Gomera on the Canary Islands to Antigua, which is about 3,000 miles. They set off in December and it's now the end of January and they're just starting to arrive here now. The boats they go in are quite amazing as well, very small. So you can see behind me, this is one of the boats that rowed across the Atlantic, and the people who had 5 in the boat, they were the overall winners, but 2 of the others have already got in as well, and there's two teams due in today, both of whom are predominantly British. In fact, there seems to be an awful lot of English or British people competing. We think they're a load of nutters, but hey-ho. That does tend to run with the English, doesn't it, really? This is the officers' quarters, and it was built in 1821. You can just imagine the balcony being filled with officers all looking over. And there's a couple of interesting things about this. The first is that on the ground floor there are cisterns that hold 1.2 million litres of water, which is collected from the roof. And the second is that an awful lot of the walls have got graffiti on, which was scrawled by Antiguan soldiers before they got their postings in World War II. And sadly, of course, a lot of them didn't actually return either. So we're at Nelson's dockyard, and we will discover wondering why it was called Nelson's dockyard, because basically this was established in the late 1600s and Nelson didn't visit here till 1784, but it's still named after him. And the thing about Nelson was he was very popular on board his ships, but actually here he wasn't popular at all, because when he arrived he forbade anybody from Antigua from trading with anybody in the newly independent Americas, and they were not very happy about that because that was where most of their trade came from. So Nelson's dockyard is actually preserved because it's one of the finest examples of a Georgian dockyard in the world, and that was why they decided to rebuild it. And actually the buildings are quite impressive. You can imagine how bustling and busy it was, and still is actually with boats today, but actually at the time it would have been quite an amazing place to be, I'm sure. Although, as it says in the thing, an awful lot of British people who came here were not used to the conditions at all, and an awful lot of them died from yellow fever or from bad sanitation, from mosquitoes, from malaria. So it probably wasn't that great a place at all, actually, was it, thinking about it? I'm videoing this road because as we drove in, I just really liked it. I thought the houses, and it seemed very Antiguan to me. I don't know if it is or not, but I really liked it on the way in, so you're going to have a little look at it as well now. Yeah, beverage serving activities, that just made me laugh. Not drinks served here, but beverage serving activities. Oh, that's a killer. Said you've got to pay the bill if you're videoing. So this is Half Moon Bay, and it's quite a famous beach in Antigua because of the shape of it. It looks a bit like a horseshoe, and it's absolutely beautiful. Not many people here, quite secluded I would say, and actually not at all crowded. And it's just lovely, beautiful white sand, turquoise sea, lovely breeze. What more could you ask for? And I'm going to go for a paddle as well, I think. Lovely. Whew, very nice. Slightly deeper than I was hoping to go, but that's fine. Hi everybody. So we just got back from Antigua and we just thought we'd reflect on what we enjoyed or didn't about it really.
Yep.
I loved it.
Yeah, no, it's great. It was made all the difference having nice weather.
Yeah, it did.
So when we left it was -4. When we got back it was about -4 as well. So we had to scrape our car when we got back into the car park. But it was just really nice having 28 degrees all day.
It was very, very civilised indeed. And when we took the car back, we'd had to change a tyre. And she said, oh, we're going to have to charge you for that. And we'd read online about the fact that some people had ended up paying 500 English pounds for having their tyres changed. And she said it'll depend how much it costs, will depend on what the tyre people say, etc., etc. And we were expecting quite a big bill. But in the end, it was about
£8.
£8 something. So you really can't complain about that.
No.
So thank you, Avis Antigua. You were very honest and we're very impressed with you.
Well done, Avis.
Absolutely.
They normally get a lot of stick car hire companies for overcharging, but on this occasion they did well, I thought.
Yeah, and the ladies there were lovely as well,
They
weren't
were,
they? Very
yes.
friendly, very helpful people, so you can't really argue with that.
And all of Antigua, everybody, everywhere we went, were just so friendly.
Yeah.
They just couldn't do enough for you. Just as you were passing them, they would say hello. Yeah, it was great. Loved the holiday.
Yeah, and I mean, even when I was out on my runs just in the little villages nearby, everybody was like, hey, how you doing, as I ran past. And even if I was exhausted, they were just waving and smiling, which I often was. They were just waving and smiling as you ran past. They obviously thought I was a nutter, but that's fine. But no, everybody was really friendly, and I never felt threatened at all in Antigua.
No.
You hear bad things about some places in the Caribbean, but certainly not Antigua.
So the only downside was the weather, which, as we say, it was 28 degrees, but it rained a fair bit. The beginning of the holiday, actually, it rained for 5 minutes or so at most, and then stopped, and then was lovely and sunny. By the end of the holiday, the wind had got up, and it was quite rainy.
The last 3 days or so it was.
We
wasn't
actually
it, really?
had one day when it just basically rained all day, didn't we?
Yeah, we did have a day when it wasn't great.
But
it didn't put us off. You
No,
know,
it
we went
didn't,
out in
no.
the car and it was fine.
it is unusual, apparently, for this time of year to rain in January in Antigua. But that's presumably because of global warming. It's one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. But no, I mean, I would go back there again. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
As I say, the people were amazing, and it was lovely for a bit of winter sun, I have to be
It
honest.
was. So if you're looking to go somewhere for January, bit of winter sun, highly recommend Antigua.
Definitely. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and send us a comment.